Welcome to my channel. Have you ever heard someone say, never start a sentence with and or but? Or maybe someone told you, you must always use whom instead of who? These rules sound scary, don't they? They sound like if you don't follow them, you are making a big mistake. But here's the truth. Many of the things you've been told about English grammar are not true at all. In fact, some of them are just old myths that teachers or books repeated for years, without checking if they were really true. Think about it for a moment. Have you ever stopped yourself from speaking English because you were afraid of breaking a grammar rule? Maybe you wanted to say something, but then thought, oh no, I don't know if this is correct. And so, you stayed quiet. Many learners experience this fear, but the good news is, you don't have to. Once you learn the truth about these grammar myths, you will feel more relaxed, more confident, and much more free to use English in real life. The exciting part is that even native speakers don't follow these so-called rules all the time. They speak freely, they write freely, and they focus more on communication than on tiny details. The purpose of English is to connect with people, not to trap you inside a box of fear. So if you have been thinking that English grammar is full of strict rules, get ready, because today we are going to break those chains. In this video, we will go step by step through the most common grammar myths. You will discover what's true, what's false, and what really matters when you speak English. Stay with me until the end, because some of these myths will truly surprise you. And once you know them, your English journey will feel lighter and more exciting. Chapter 1. The myth of never start a sentence with and or but. Have you ever sat in a classroom and heard the teacher say, never start a sentence with and or but? Maybe you even saw it written in a grammar book with a big red cross next to it. For many English learners, this becomes one of the first rules they memorize. And because it is taught so strongly, learners carry it for years, feeling scared to break it. It almost feels like breaking the law. But let me tell you the truth right now. This is not really a grammar rule. It is just a myth, and once you understand why, you will feel so much freer when you speak or write in English. So, where did this myth even come from? A long time ago, in the 19th and early 20th century, teachers and grammar writers wanted students to write in a very formal and proper way. They thought English writing should look like academic essays, very neat and serious, almost like Latin. Because of this, they told students not to start a sentence with and or but. Why? Because they felt it looked casual, like spoken English, not like serious writing. In truth, they were more worried about style than grammar. But over time, this preference became a fake rule, and students began to believe it was a law of English grammar. But here's the big question. If this rule is true, then why do we see so many famous writers and newspapers break it? Let's take a closer look. Writers like Charles Dickens, Jane Austen, and even Shakespeare often began sentences with and or but. For example, in Dickens's famous novel Great Expectations, you will find sentences that begin with and. Why would a genius like Dickens do this if it was wrong? The answer is simple, because it is not wrong. It is completely natural. And it's not just old writers. If you read a modern newspaper like the New York Times, The Guardian, or The Washington Post, you will see sentences starting with and or but every single day. Journalists use it because it helps ideas flow more smoothly. It makes the text feel like a conversation, not like a boring textbook. Even in speeches, great leaders and teachers often begin with and or but to keep the audience engaged. Imagine a speech without these connecting words. It would feel dry and robotic. Let me give you some examples right now. And the truth is, people everywhere deserve freedom. But we cannot ignore the challenges ahead. Do these sentences sound wrong to you? Probably not. In fact, they sound strong, clear, and powerful. This is the magic of starting with and or but. It makes your English feel alive. Here's the spike moment. You can start your sentences with and or but, and it is 100% correct. Yes, you heard that right. You do not need to feel guilty or scared about it anymore. In fact, if you never allow yourself to use these words at the beginning, your English might actually sound unnatural. Because in real conversations, people do it all the time. Think about how you speak in your own language. You often use a small word to continue your thought, right? English works the same way. Now, of course, balance is important. If every single sentence you say begins with and or but, it will start to sound repetitive. For example, and I went to the store, and I bought bread, and I saw my friend, and I came home. That doesn't sound good. So the advice is simple. Don't overuse it. Use it when it feels natural, when it helps connect your ideas, but don't put it at the beginning of every single sentence. That way, your English will sound smooth and natural, not heavy and robotic. So what is the key lesson here? English is flexible. Grammar is not a prison. It is a tool to help you express your thoughts clearly. Many so-called rules are not strict laws, but style choices. Some teachers may prefer not to start with and or but in formal writing, and that's okay. But in everyday English, in stories, in conversations, in newspapers, and even in professional writing, it is completely fine. Let me give you one more reason to feel confident. The Oxford English Dictionary, one of the most trusted sources of English, says clearly that starting a sentence with and or but is correct. Even grammar experts agree. So if you ever feel nervous, remember that even the experts support you. Think of it this way. English is not about following fake rules that make you scared. It is about communicating with people. If starting a sentence with and or but makes your idea clearer, easier, and stronger, then do it. That is how real English works. So the next time someone tells you, never start a sentence with and or but, smile and remember the truth. You know better now. You know that it is not a mistake. It is not bad grammar. It is just another myth, and now you are free from it. And this is only the beginning. Because in the next chapters, we are going to break even more grammar myths. Myths that may have stopped you from feeling confident in English. Stay with me, because the next one might surprise you even more. Chapter 2. The myth of you must never split infinitives. Now let's move to another grammar myth that many learners worry about. The idea that you must never split infinitives. This one sounds complicated at first, so let me make it very simple. An infinitive is the word to plus a verb. For example, to eat, to learn, to go. Splitting an infinitive means putting another word between to and the verb. For example, to quickly eat, to really learn, to boldly go. Many teachers tell students, never do this. Never put a word in the middle. Always keep to and the verb together. But just like the last chapter, this is another myth. Splitting infinitives is not wrong. In fact, sometimes it makes your English sound stronger and more natural. So where did this myth come from? The answer is history. Long ago, grammar writers wanted English to look more like Latin. In Latin, it is impossible to split an infinitive because the verb is only one word. But English is different. Our infinitives use two words, to plus verb. Since Latin was seen as the perfect language in old times, Teachers copied Latin rules into English, even when they didn't fit. That is why they told students never to split infinitives. But the truth is, English is not Latin. English has its own style, its own rhythm, and its own rules. So forcing Latin rules onto English doesn't make sense. Let's look at a famous example. If you are a fan of science fiction, you probably know the line from Star Trek: "To boldly go where no man has gone before." This sentence is one of the most famous lines in television history. But guess what? It is a split infinitive. The word boldly comes between to and go. Now, imagine if the writers had followed the rule and avoided splitting it. The line would become, "To go boldly where no man has gone before." Does it sound the same? Not really. The rhythm is weaker. The excitement is smaller. To boldly go is stronger, more powerful, and more memorable. That is why the writers chose it, and that is why people still quote it today. And it's not just in movies. You will see split infinitives everywhere, in books, newspapers, magazines, and even academic writing. Writers use them because they are useful. For example, she decided to quickly finish her homework. I want to really understand this lesson. We need to carefully check the details. Now let's test this. If we remove the split, the sentences become, "She decided quickly to finish her homework." I want really to understand this lesson. We need carefully to check the details. Do these sentences sound natural to you? Probably not. They sound strange, heavy, and old-fashioned. This shows us something important. Sometimes splitting the infinitive is not just okay. It is the best choice for clarity. Here comes the spike moment. You don't need to fear splitting infinitives. In fact, if you avoid them completely, your English might sound awkward. Using them makes your speech more natural, more flexible, and more modern. It gives you freedom to place the word exactly where it creates the clearest meaning. Of course, like with many things in English, balance is important. You don't want to split infinitives in every single sentence, because then it might feel forced. But when the split makes the meaning stronger or the rhythm smoother, you should absolutely use it. Native speakers do it all the time, and good writers do too. So what is the key lesson here? The important thing in English is clarity and style, not obeying old myths from Latin. The goal of language is communication. If a split infinitive helps you say something more clearly, then use it. If it makes your sentence sound more natural, then it is the right choice. Grammar rules are not meant to trap you. They are meant to guide you. And sometimes, breaking these so-called rules is the best way to sound like a real English speaker. So from now on, when you hear someone say, "You must never split an infinitive," you will know the truth. You can smile and remember that even one of the most famous lines in history is a split infinitive. If it is good enough for Star Trek, it is good enough for you. This is the power of learning the truth about grammar myths. It takes away fear and gives you confidence. You don't have to walk on eggshells, worrying about every little detail. Instead, you can focus on making your English clear, natural, and strong. And this is only the second myth. There are still more myths that hold learners back. In the next chapter, we will talk about one of the most confusing ones, the difference between who and whom. Many learners are afraid of this, but once you understand the truth, you will see that it is much simpler than you think. Chapter 3. The myth of who versus whom must always be used perfectly. Let's talk about one of the most famous grammar fears, the difference between who and whom. Many English learners freeze the moment they see this word whom. They think, "Oh no, what if I use it wrong? Will people laugh at me? Will my sentence sound silly?" Some teachers and grammar books make it sound like this is one of the most important rules in English, and that you must always use whom perfectly. But here's the truth. Most native speakers almost never use whom in casual conversation. Yes, you heard me right. Even people who speak English from birth rarely say whom when they are talking with friends or family. So why does this myth exist? Well, for hundreds of years, whom was considered the correct object form of who. Just like we say he and him, English also had who and whom. For example, who is calling? Subject, whom did you call? Object, in very formal English, this is still correct. But in everyday life, English has changed. Language is always moving, always growing, and in modern English, people often just use who in both situations. And guess what? No one complains. No one even notices. For example, almost everyone says, "Who did you call?" instead of "Whom did you call?" Let's have a little fun with this. Imagine I ask you, "Who do you love?" Sounds natural, right? You've probably heard that question in songs and movies. Now let's change it to "Whom do you love?" Suddenly it feels stiff, maybe even funny, like an old movie line. People might even laugh because it sounds too formal. In fact, there's a famous song called "Who Do You Love?" Can you imagine if the title was "Whom Do You Love?" It just wouldn't work. Here's another example. Let's role-play a conversation. Person A, who are you waiting for? Person B, I'm waiting for my friend. This sounds natural, easy, and correct. Now try this. Person A, whom are you waiting for? Person B, I'm waiting for my friend. Do you hear the difference? The second one sounds heavy, like a grammar test. But in real life, people don't talk like that. So here comes the spike moment. You don't need to stress about whom. If you use who instead of whom, people will understand you perfectly. In fact, you will sound more natural and modern. Native speakers almost always do the same. The only place where whom still appears often is in very formal writing, like legal documents, academic papers, or sometimes in very formal speeches. But for daily life, conversations, emails, and even most writing, who is completely fine. Now, does this mean whom is useless? Not exactly. It still exists, and you might see it in books or newspapers. Sometimes it is used for style, to sound formal or serious. For example, to whom it may concern at the beginning of a formal letter is still correct, and people use it in professional settings. But outside of those situations, whom is slowly disappearing. Language is like that. It drops words that feel too complicated or unnecessary. So here is the key lesson. Don't let whom block you from speaking. Don't get stuck in silence because you are worried about using it incorrectly. If you are not sure, just use who. 99% of the time, it will be fine. People care about understanding your message, not about whether you followed an old grammar rule. Communication is always more important than perfection. Think of it this way. Imagine you meet a new friend and you want to ask about their teacher. You could say, "Who is your teacher?" Perfectly fine. Or, if you are nervous and think, "Should it be whom?" You might pause, hesitate, and maybe say nothing at all. Which one helps you connect more? Of course, the first one. The goal of English is to build connections, not to make you scared of making mistakes. And here's a little secret. Even many educated native speakers don't always know when to use whom. If you ask them to explain the exact rule, many wouldn't be able to. They just use who and move on. So if they don't worry, why should you? So, the next time you hear someone say, you must always use whom correctly. Smile and remember the truth. Whom is not gone, but it is not a word you need to fear. You are free to use who, and people will understand you. You will sound natural, confident, and modern. In short, whom is like an old piece of furniture, still around, but not always necessary. Use it if you want to be very formal, but don't let it control you. Real English is about connection, not about fear. And now that we've cleared this myth, let's move to another one. In the next chapter, we will talk about something that almost every learner has heard: the idea that you cannot end a sentence with a preposition. This is another myth that makes people feel nervous. But the truth, as you will see, is very different. Chapter 4. The myth of you can't end a sentence with a preposition. Here's another grammar rule that almost every English learner hears at some point. Never end a sentence with a preposition. Teachers often point to sentences like, "Where are you at?" or "Who are you talking to?" and say, "That's wrong." You should never finish with words like to, with, at, for, from. This can make learners feel nervous, as if they are breaking a serious grammar law. But just like the myths we already explored, this one is not really a rule at all. Ending a sentence with a preposition is not wrong. In fact, in everyday English, it is completely natural. So where did this strange idea come from? Once again, the answer is Latin. In Latin, sentences cannot end with prepositions because of the way the grammar works. Long ago, grammar teachers wanted English to copy Latin rules, so they said, English sentences must also not end with prepositions. But here's the problem. English is not Latin. English has its own structure, rhythm, and logic. Forcing Latin rules onto English is like forcing one country's traffic laws onto another country. Imagine if someone said, "You must drive on the left side of the road in every country, because that's what we do in mine." It wouldn't work, right? The same is true for English. It doesn't need Latin's rules to function. Now let's look at real English. Famous writers and speakers often end their sentences with prepositions. Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister, once joked about this rule. Someone criticized him for ending a sentence with a preposition, and he replied, "This is the sort of nonsense up with which I will not put." He was making fun of the rule by showing how awkward a sentence becomes if you try to avoid putting a preposition at the end. A natural version of that sentence would be, "This is the sort of nonsense I will not put up with." Do you hear the difference? The first one sounds robotic and confusing. The second one, with the preposition at the end, sounds normal and clear. Here are more natural examples. "That's the person I was talking about." "What are you looking for?" "This is the book I told you about." Do any of these sound wrong to you? Probably not. In fact, they sound like everyday English. Try changing them to avoid the preposition at the end, and you'll see how unnatural they become. "That's the person about whom I was talking." "For what are you looking?" "This is the book about which I told you." Do you notice the difference? These sentences are grammatically correct, but they sound stiff, formal, and even strange in casual conversation. If you spoke like this with your friends, they would probably smile or laugh because it sounds so unnatural. And this is where the spike moment comes in. Let's put two sentences side by side. With whom are you speaking? Who are you speaking with? The first one follows the no preposition at the end rule. It is formal, correct, but stiff. The second one breaks the so-called rule, but it sounds natural and friendly. Which one do you think real English speakers use in daily life? Of course, the second one. Native speakers almost always put the preposition at the end in casual conversation. Now, does this mean the first version is wrong? No, it is still correct, but it is formal. You might see it in academic writing or very official documents. But for normal, everyday English, there is nothing wrong with ending a sentence with a preposition. In fact, it is often the clearest and most natural choice. So what is the key lesson here? Don't let this myth make you afraid. If a sentence feels natural with a preposition at the end, use it. You are not breaking any real grammar rule. You are actually speaking the way native speakers speak. The only time you might want to avoid it is if you are writing something extremely formal, like a legal contract. Even then, many modern writers and editors accept prepositions at the end because clarity is more important than old-fashioned rules. Think of English as a living language. It changes, it grows, and it adapts. Myths like this one only make learners feel trapped. But once you know the truth, you can speak with more freedom. You can ask questions naturally. What are you waiting for? Instead of, for what are you waiting? You can tell stories easily. That's the place I was dreaming of. Instead of, that's the place of which I was dreaming. One sounds human, the other sounds like a robot. So from now on, when someone tells you, don't end a sentence with a preposition, remember Churchill's joke and smile. You know the truth. Real English allows it, and native speakers do it every single day. And now, let's move to the next myth, one that confuses many learners even more, the myth of double negatives. Some people say they are always wrong, but the truth is a little more interesting. Let's explore that in Chapter 5. Chapter 5. The myth of double negatives are always wrong. Here's a grammar myth that often confuses learners more than any other. The idea that double negatives are always wrong. Maybe you've seen a sentence like this: I don't know nothing. A teacher would probably put a big red X on it and say, that's incorrect. You must say, I don't know anything. And yes, in standard English, I don't know nothing is considered incorrect. But the story doesn't stop there. The truth is more interesting. And understanding it will make you a smarter learner. Because while double negatives are usually avoided in formal English, they are actually used in many dialects, in everyday conversations, and even in music for emphasis. So let's start with the basics. In standard English grammar, two negatives cancel each other out. So if you say, I don't know nothing, it technically means you know something, because don't and nothing are both negatives. That's why teachers correct it to, I don't know anything. That version is clear, correct, and accepted everywhere in school, exams, and professional writing. But here's the fun part. In many dialects of English, especially in informal speech, double negatives are not mistakes. They are a way to make the meaning stronger. When someone says, I don't know nothing, what they really mean is, I absolutely don't know anything. The double negative is used for emphasis, not logic. And this is something you can hear in real life, all the time. Let's look at music. Many famous songs use double negatives, and nobody thinks they sound wrong. For example, the Rolling Stones have a song called I Can't Get No Satisfaction. According to strict grammar rules, that's incorrect. It should be I can't get any satisfaction. But if they sang it that way, the song would lose its rhythm and its punch. The double negative makes the line stronger, more emotional, more memorable. And that's why millions of people around the world sing it the way it is. Another example is the famous Elvis Presley song, Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog. The phrase, ain't nothing, is a double negative, but it gives the song its style and character. If Elvis had sung, It isn't anything but a hound dog, it would sound boring and formal, not like a rock and roll hit. And it's not just in songs. In everyday speech, You might hear people say things like, "We don't need no education." Pink Floyd even used this line in their famous song, "She ain't got no time for that. I ain't doing nothing wrong." Do these sentences follow the grammar rules taught in school? No. But do they sound natural in certain situations, especially in music, culture, or casual speech? Yes, absolutely. Here comes the spike moment. Understanding double negatives doesn't just help you avoid mistakes. It helps you understand real English. Imagine listening to a song or a movie and hearing, "I ain't got no money." If you only know the classroom rule, you might get confused. You might think, "Wait, does this mean he has money or not?" But if you know how people really use it, you'll understand perfectly. He means he has no money, and he's saying it with extra force. So what should you do as a learner? Here's the important advice. For your own speaking and writing, especially in school, exams, or professional situations, stick with the standard form. "I don't know anything." "She doesn't have any time." "We don't need any help." These are safe, correct, and accepted everywhere. But at the same time, don't be shocked or confused when you hear double negatives in songs, movies, or casual conversations. They are part of real English too. You don't need to copy them, but you do need to understand them. Think of it this way. Rules in English are not always absolute bans. They are guidelines to help you be clear. The goal is communication, not perfection. In some situations, like music or storytelling, breaking the rule actually makes the language stronger and more emotional. In other situations, like exams or business emails, following the rule makes you look professional and educated. Both have their place. So the key lesson is this. Grammar rules are about clarity and audience, not about fear. If you are in school or writing formally, avoid double negatives. But if you hear them in songs or casual talk, don't panic. They are just another flavor of English. Knowing this will make you more flexible, more confident, and more connected to the real language. And now, let's move to the final myth, the one that ties all the others together. It's the biggest myth of all, the idea that grammar rules are more important than communication itself. Let's break that myth in Chapter 6. Chapter 6. The myth of grammar rules are more important than communication. We have talked about many myths so far, about starting sentences with and or but, about splitting infinitives, about who versus whom, about ending sentences with prepositions, and even about double negatives. But now, it's time for the biggest myth of all, the myth that hides behind every other one. The myth that scares learners more than anything else. And that myth is this. Grammar rules are more important than communication. Think about it. How many times have you stopped yourself from speaking because you were afraid of making a grammar mistake? How many times have you wanted to share an idea, but the voice in your head said, "What if I'm wrong? What if people laugh? What if my grammar is not perfect?" This is the moment when grammar becomes a prison instead of a tool. And sadly, many learners live in this prison for years. They study grammar books, they memorize rules, they correct themselves again and again, but when the time comes to speak, they freeze. Their mouth stays closed, and their ideas stay locked inside. Here's the truth you need to hear today. Grammar is important, but it is not the most important thing. The most important thing in English, or any language, is communication. The goal of speaking English is not to show off perfect grammar. The goal is to connect with other people, to share your thoughts, to understand and be understood. Let me give you a spike moment here. Imagine you meet a new friend. They smile at you and ask, "How are you?" Now, you have two choices. Choice 1, you stay silent, because you are not sure if you should say I am fine or I'm doing well. Choice 2, you smile back and say, I fine, or I good, or whatever words you can find. Which choice brings connection? Which choice shows confidence? Of course, the second one. Even if your grammar is not perfect, your message is clear. The other person understands you, and the friendship begins. Now imagine the opposite. You stay silent because you want to be 100% correct. The other person might think you are shy, or not interested, or even unfriendly. The chance for connection disappears. Do you see the point? Perfection in grammar without communication is useless. But imperfect grammar with real communication, that's powerful. That's how people learn, grow, and connect. This doesn't mean grammar is bad or unimportant. Grammar is like the road that helps cars move smoothly. It gives structure and clarity to our sentences. But just like a road is not the same as a journey, grammar is not the same as communication. You don't travel on a road just to admire the road. You travel because you want to reach somewhere, to meet someone, to experience something. In the same way, you don't speak English just to show grammar. You speak because you have something to say. Let me give you another example. Imagine a small child learning to speak. When a child says, "Me want cookie," does the parent get angry and say, "No, no, that's wrong"? You must say, "I want a cookie." Of course not. The parent smiles, understands, and maybe even gives the cookie. Why? Because the message is clear. The child communicates successfully, even without perfect grammar. And guess what? Over time, the child improves. They hear the correct form again and again. And one day they naturally say, "I want a cookie." Learning happens through communication, not by waiting in silence until you are perfect. Here's the key lesson. Grammar is a tool, not a prison. Don't let it lock you up. Use it to help you, but don't let it stop you. When you speak, focus on clarity, not on perfection. Ask yourself, did the other person understand me? If the answer is yes, then you succeeded. The small grammar mistakes don't matter. In fact, native speakers make mistakes too, especially when they speak fast or casually. The difference is they don't freeze. They keep going because they know communication is the goal. So how do you let go of this myth? First, change your mindset. Every time you speak, remind yourself, I am here to connect, not to be perfect. Second, practice in real situations. Don't wait until you know every rule. Speak with friends, join conversations, even if your grammar is not perfect. The more you practice, the better you will get. Third, listen to yourself. Celebrate the times you communicate successfully. Every smile, every answer, every connection is proof that your English works. Let me wrap this up with a thought. All the myths we talked about, whether about and or but, infinitives, whom, prepositions, or double negatives, are really small compared to this final one. Because if you believe that grammar is more important than communication, you will never have the courage to test the others. But once you let go of this myth, once you see grammar as your helper and not your master, you will speak with freedom. You will feel confident. You will use English the way it is meant to be used, not as a classroom exercise, but as a living, breathing language of connection. So the next time you feel nervous, remember this. People don't want your perfect grammar. They want your ideas, your feelings, your friendship. Speak bravely. Speak freely. Because communication is the heart of English, and grammar is just one of the tools to help you get there. If this video opened your eyes to the truth about English grammar, and helped you see that many of the rules you were afraid of are really just myths, then give this video a like. It tells me you found it useful, and it also helps more learners discover these lessons. And if you are ready to learn English with freedom, not fear, write in the comments. I will learn with confidence. I promise I will reply and cheer you on, because your journey matters to me. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more simple, powerful English lessons. Lessons that not only explain grammar and clear words, but also give you the courage to use English in real life, with real people, in real situations. Remember, you don't need to be perfect, you just need to be brave.